We are recording this meeting, everybody. So if you're uncomfortable with that, then now's the time to step away. That full disclosure. Thanks for joining us. This is the Ad Hoc Marine Planning Committee meeting. It's a committee of the Pacific Fishery Management Council. This is a publicly noticed meeting. There's an opportunity for public comment as well. I think that is slated for a little bit later. Oh, for 2:45 p.m. And if we're ahead of schedule, then we'll get to that earlier than 2:45. I'm Kerry Griffin. I'm a council staff member. I staff this committee. And then the co-chairs of the committee are Mike Conroy and Susan Chambers. I'm just going to go over some front matter and ground rules and then turn it over to them to walk through the agenda, talk about any agenda changes or additions. I know there's at least one minor change in order, but no big deal that I'll let them talk about. It is being recorded, and we are saving the transcript or recording the transcript, and then we'll post it to the meeting webpage, so people can go back and listen to it or review any slides or that sort of thing. That's what we do for all of the MPC meetings. This is an official committee meeting, so we give preference to the MPC members. We do ask you to raise your hand just to make it easier to recognize who wants to say something. This is not a hugely attended meeting like some of them, and so we might run it a little bit more loose if someone has a clarifying question or something like that who's not a member of the MPC. We do have to be a little careful about going down rabbit holes and getting sort of distracted from our agenda. And of course, we do have the opportunity for public comment, but we only have 24 people on board right now. Sometimes when we have 100 or 200, you got to be a little more strict with who gets to speak when and all that stuff. But I'm not too worried about it today. So the chat function is open and running. Please use it for like technical help or for posting links or information, that sort of thing. Please do not use the chat to hold side conversations. It's hard for me and for the chairs to, hard enough to pay attention to the main conversation without having to pay attention to what's going on in the chat. So it's better, to avoid having sort of substantive Q's and A's going on in the chat, but feel free to use it if you want to convey some information or share a link or you have are having some technical problems, that kind of thing. Let's see. The last thing that I'll mention before turning it over to the co-chairs, and they'll be talking about this also, is that this is the meeting that we hold in front of every council meeting. So of the 5 council meetings per year, the Pacific Fishery Management Council asked this committee to meet in advance of the advanced briefing book so that we could discuss relevant and topical issues and put a report in the advanced briefing book for the upcoming meeting. So that means we have to meet like at least 5, maybe 6 weeks ahead of each council meeting. So anyway, this is the meeting in advance of the September meeting. There may be a need or an opportunity for a supplemental report, but that's okay. We've done that before. And we don't need to get into too many details about that right now, but we'll, at the end of the agenda, we'll talk about what next steps and how to put together the report and that sort of thing. So I guess I'll just stop there unless there's some questions about the, about how we're running the meeting or other logistical stuff. And then I guess I would turn it over to Mike and Susan to talk about the agenda and get going with our presenters. Okay, then. Well, Mike, Susan, why don't you take it away?
I was going to be, I'll let Susan go.
Gee, thanks, Mike. No, just kidding. Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. It seems like you know where that is by now. So we do have a slight change to the agenda today. We usually, we were going to go with state-by-state updates. But I think we had California, Oregon, and then Washington. But I think due to time constraints or something. I think we were going to do Washington first, and then do the tribal update, and anything from National Marine Fisheries Service, and then take a break. So, Mike, was there anything else? Did you want to mention before we get started?
No, I got nothing. Just thanks everybody for making the time to put up with us, listen to us, and engage with us, and hopefully help us figure out what we need to do. And then at some point in time, as folks are listening, especially NPC members, as you're listening today, keep an eye and an ear on things that we'd want to include in our report. I know that we're going to talk about this more toward the end, but we have a short timeline for turning around a report for the advanced briefing book. So we'll come back to that later on, but just wanted to make sure to flag that. And as folks listen today, if there's something important that you hear that it drop dead has to be included in the report, keep that in mind. That's all I got. So we will turn it over to Heather Hall. I can't see. I'm assuming you're here. I can't see that you're here. Now I can see that you're here.
I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Fine. Perfectly. Thanks.
All right. Great. Thanks, everybody. And yeah, I'm kind of filling in for Corey. He's on vacation this week, and just wanted to provide a brief update for Washington. The Washington Coastal Marine Advisory Committee, we call it the WCMAC, or there's multiple pronunciations of the group, but we call it the WCMAC, had a meeting in June. A representative from the governor's office, Carrie Sessions, was at that meeting, and we've also had a couple of follow-up meetings with her through the State Ocean Caucus Working Group, and just wanted to share some comments she had. The WCMAC had put together a document of principles of engagement, and just outlining some key things for the WCMAC in terms of coordinating on offshore wind energy. And the governor's office received those and found them really helpful. So she mentioned that. And then Carrie also let the group know that the governor's office is thinking hard about stakeholder outreach for offshore wind energy. Things are still not really moving quickly in Washington, but the governor's office is really cognizant of the concerns from the tribes and stakeholders, and concerns about the BOEM task force approach. And they're thinking really carefully about that as they're thinking about how to advance the ball moving forward in that collaboration with tribes and stakeholders. And the governor's office isn't presupposing that they'll do anything, but rather being open to the opportunity and looking for how to take the next step, kind of in light of all the concerns they've heard. So a thoughtful and cautious approach to how to move ahead, particularly with regard to the task force and stakeholder engagement and working with the tribes. So I think that covers the update for Washington, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that, Heather. Does anybody have any questions for Heather? And I see Mike O has joined us too. So we'll see if Mike has anything he wants to add to that or subtract for that or whatnot, unless we have any clarifying questions for Heather from anybody. I see none. You might be off the hook.
Okay, thanks. I'll be around for a while if anything comes up.
Thanks. Mike O, did you have anything that you wanted to add? I know you might have jumped in late, but we got an update from Heather about a brief update on the June WCMAC meeting, and then some what the representative from the governor's office had to say about the, at least verbally had to say about the recommendations that came out of WCMAC with regards to stakeholder engagement and with BOEM. And I'm assuming that Mike's silence is meaning he has nothing to add. Heather, do you have a clarifying question?
I just had something to add. If that's all right.
We'll stand. Yeah, give just a sec, see if there's any questions, and then we'll come back to you. And apparently Mike can't unmute. Carrie, what's the approach for unmuting on the phone here? Is it *9?
I think isn't it *6 to unmute
I don't
yourself?
have the faintest idea.
And I might, let's see. Oh, there's Mike. I'm trying to unmute him from here. Okay, Mike, try again to unmute yourself or speak. Speak, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
There
Yep.
we go.
Sorry about that. The only thing that I had, if it wasn't mentioned, is that Heather Mann has been invited to speak before the technical team for WCMAC and also at WCMAC in September. I don't know if Heather covered this already or not. If she did, just tell me to pound sand. But in that process, it's to answer some questions relevant to how the Oregon letter all came about. And we thought the best way to do it, or some of us did, Larry and myself and Dale, anyway, if we had Heather just describe the process and the reason why it ended up going the direction it did as a stakeholder-driven request, and that Heather was leading the charge on that. And was able to get through all the different offices and to prevail upon the governor to take action. So, but anyway, she'll explain it. She's booked for both of those, and she may have a few words to say after that. Thank you. That's it. It was a request from WCMAC itself, so the main body. So.
Thanks for that, Mike. Heather, go ahead.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I don't have anything to add on that. I've agreed to do those presentations. But I did want to add to what Heather provided before, a little bit of additional stakeholder involvement. A small group of us met with Governor Inslee a week before last. It developed out of fishermen that fish in Alaska primarily, but live in Washington. But the meeting turned into mostly a discussion on offshore wind. And we were asked to provide a follow-up within a day or two. And I think, Heather, you've probably seen it. And it was a letter signed by several of us encouraging the governor first not to go the route of the BOEM task force, but to figure out a different approach and also to embrace the goals and objectives coming out of the WCMAC process. And I'm happy to share that letter to the governor with you guys if you're interested in seeing it. The meeting came about really fast, but I think, as Heather describes, Governor Inslee's dedication and hearing, authentically concerned with what he's hearing, and I think that it's more than lip service. So I just wanted to echo what Heather said and just provide that additional information. Thanks.
Thank you. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Thanks for that, Heather. All right. Anybody else for Washington before we move to Lila, please?
Hi. Question for Heather Hall. Could you share the principles that the WCMAC has come up with? Or is that something on a website that we can see?
Yeah, hi Lila. I'm looking for it right now, and I will definitely share it. I'll either send it to Mike and Susan and Carrie, or I'll attach it in the chat.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, last call for Washington. All right, sorry, Oregon, we're going to skip you and go down to the lovely state of California. However, before doing that, I do want to highlight that last week the White House put out a fact sheet that talked about all the great things that's come from offshore wind for the American economy. It was published last week, and it, like I said, it highlights the work that the administration has done to rapidly expand this new industry. And I'm going to throw a link to that in the chat for everybody's reading enjoyment. Just amongst the high level things that were mentioned in this press release, the publication of a final sale notice in the Gulf of Mexico. I'll throw a link to that in the chat as well. This was just the reason I mentioned that is just to note that was exactly 1 year to the day after the announcement of draft WIAs in the Gulf of Mexico. This shows that the timeline, BOEM's timeline for is shrinking. In California, the final sale notice was published about 15 months after designation of the Humboldt wind energy area and 11 and a half months after the Morro Bay wind energy area. And recall that there were no draft WIAs presented for California. So just in terms of timing and thinking through how quickly these things can come into fruition, especially with regard to what may or may not happen off Oregon in the not too distant future. Just thought I'd throw that timeline out there. It also notes that there was a fourfold increase in investments in the U.S. offshore wind industry. Also last week, the Department of Energy published an updated map of offshore wind supply chain investments. Only one of those is located on the West Coast, and that's the Humboldt Bay Marine Terminal Project, which we'll be hitting on that in a moment. And then some updates on other permitting activities. And note, these are all affecting the East Coast, but there was a final environmental impact statement for Revolution Wind. There was an approval of a project off New Jersey, draft environmental impact statements for 6 additional East Coast projects. I don't suspect we'll start to see these off California for at least 3 years and likely longer than that. But in total, BOEM and cooperating agencies are on track to complete reviews of at least 16 projects plans by 2025, representing more than 27 gigawatts. And like I said, I think these are all going to be on the East Coast. And then also noting that construction has begun on 2 projects off the East Coast, the Vineyard 1 project in Massachusetts and South Fork off New York. So I just wanted to throw that out there, just hit on that real quick before moving into the California specific updates. The first one, and as you will recall, last year when the California Coastal Commission conditionally concurred on BOEM's request for a consistency determination for the lease sales, they included a number of conditions, one of which dealing with fisheries was condition 7. You can see that the full language of that in our MPC report 1 from the June briefing book. In particular, the subsection C of condition 7 required a working group, and the California Coastal Commission is now seeking applications and nominations to fill that working group. I will throw a link to that in the chat, just the application form itself. I'll throw that into the chat, and noting that the deadline for that application is August 11th, and it is intended or anticipated that the first meeting of that working group will occur sometime either late September between the late September and the middle of October. So that's underway. Encourage folks to check that out. Second California update is in Humboldt Bay, the notice of preparation of a draft environmental impact report for the Humboldt Bay offshore wind heavy lift multi-purpose marine terminal project. Just noting that the comment deadline was recently extended until the 25th of August. That the old comment deadline was the 3rd. This draft EIR will identify, evaluate, and disclose possible environmental effects of the multi-purpose marine terminal project. And Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Habitat Committee discussed this in June and opted against recommending a QR letter during the scoping phase, but rather wait until the draft EIR has been published. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And at that time, it was a 30-day comment period, and it had just kicked off, and so it didn't seem worth it to really bust our butts to try to get something through the QR process and done within 30 days. Also knowing that this was a notice of intent and not not a draft EIR, which is more important to comment on. So yeah, you got it right.
Okay, thanks. And while Carrie was explaining that, I threw a link to the notice of preparation into the chat as well. As I said, the comment deadline closes now on the 25th of August at 5 p.m. And then in terms of the final state update is we expect to see draft chapters on sea space identification, and the second one on impacts in the not too distant future. Whether or not they'll be released before or after the September meeting remains to be seen. If I had to guess, I would say that the draft will be available to the public near the beginning of the September council meeting. Then hopefully there'll be enough of a time frame where we can contemplate whether or not we want to comment on that. And that's it. That's what I have for California. I'm going to be quiet and see if Steve or Crystal or anybody else has anything they want to add to what I just had to say.
Well, I'll just add my 2 cents. I think it's very likely that the council will want to comment on the Energy Commission's draft impacts report and the other elements of that report.
Yep. Let's hope that there's a time to do so.
I don't have anything to add. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, perfect. All right, then unless anybody has any clarifying questions or comments or whatnot with regard to what you just heard about California, I'm going to shut up and ask Susan or Jessica to take over for the middle state.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll start us off and then defer to Jessica as she knows more about the intricacies of what is going on with state agencies. A couple things we talked about in the past. One was House Bill 3382 that would exempt the Port of Coos Bay from some environmental regulations or review in order to do the channel widening and deepening for that project. So far, House Bill 3382 passed the Oregon legislature, but it is still awaiting Governor Kotek's signature. And so far that hasn't happened yet. So I think she has 30 days, or maybe it's longer, I can't remember, from when it was passed in the legislature to sign the bill for it to take effect. I can throw a link in the chat to all the bills that she has signed. It just may not be updated yet, or maybe it's updated and she really just has not signed it yet. I do not know for sure. Let's see. So I'll throw that in the chat in a second. As far as the BOEM draft wind energy areas, we haven't heard anything on that, except that I know BOEM has been talking with tribes and Governor Kotek's office and some of the state agencies at pretty high levels. The Governor Kotek and several state congressmen and senators, or a few of them anyway, sent a letter requesting that BOEM pause until we get some more information on the marine resources in those areas and the effects on those resources from offshore wind. I'll throw a link to that letter in the chat as well. But so far, we're not sure about the timing, just that the talks have been taking place. Lastly, the Oregon Ocean Policy Advisory Council will hold a meeting from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on September 8th to finalize the Territorial Sea Plan Part 4 relating to undersea cables. It will be probably a hybrid meeting, both in person and virtual. It's also the first day of some of the advisory body meetings in Spokane. So I may be able to attend part of it, or some of us may be able to attend part of it virtually. But the Territorial Sea Plan Part 4 working group has held, I think, 10 meetings so far and have worked through all the revising the wording and everything for Territorial Sea Plan Part 4, and have done a really good job at the task for which they were assigned. Scott McMullen was on the working group, and as was I, but Scott has a much more detailed involvement and can probably speak to it if we have any questions about it. And that's about all I had. So I guess I will turn to Jessica to see if she has anything to add, and then Scott to see if you want to add anything about the Part 4 process. And I think Heather had a comment about the BOEM talks as well. So Jessica, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Susan. The only bit of addition I can add is that I do know that the governor's office has been talking with several executive state agencies, and that includes ODFW, on developing Oregon's position on how it will move forward in this process. And ODFW is still waiting for guidance, and we have no update kind of on that estimated duration of a pause/hold that was discussed in the letter from the governor. And that's all I've got.
Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So the TSP Part 4 is an update of the rules, the Territorial Sea Plan rules addressing offshore infrastructure, particularly cables and pipelines. But there's also sort of language in there now that would apply to other structures, whatever they might be. You probably could assume some of the scientific sensor infrastructure might be considered part of that. The process for permitting a cable or pipeline is probably going to be a lot more extensive than it is currently once this is adopted, and it will require the applicant to provide a lot more information. And much of the background on that is because things like offshore wind are considered to be sort of a new use that isn't well known. So particularly the agencies wanted the ability to get a lot more information. So submarine cables, traditional telecom cables, pretty well known. They go in and have pretty minimal impact, at least in Oregon, to the fishing industry and others. So it didn't seem like a lot of that was necessary, but the primary reason is because there are potential new uses that this language would cover, and the possibility of pipelines in the future was another consideration. So there is a section that says that some of the information required may be waived by the state if it's deemed not to be necessary for a particular project application. So separately, Susan, I had another comment on just sort of an update. One of my cable owners, Alaska Communication System, has the cable that passes through the Coos Bay call area, or the actually through the what BOEM is calling the unconflicted area. It actually has a submarine cable, and so I and the representative from the cable company met by phone with Gene Thurston Keller, and just went over a little bit about it. Sounds like BOEM will not carve out a spot for the cable when they go to lease that area, if it's included in the lease, the wind energy area. But they will notify applicants that there is a cable there, and that they will have to provide accommodation for cable maintenance, which essentially means they won't be able to put turbines or anchors over the submarine cable, and for a reasonable buffer around that line. So that's about it.
Great, thank you, Scott. That's pretty interesting about the cable going through the area. Let's see, I see Jessica's hand up, followed by Mike Okaneski.
Yeah, just a clarifying question, Scott. What have you discussed what a reasonable buffer looks like for spacing wise? Have numbers been put out there on what reasonable would be considered?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. The ICPC guideline, which is the International Cable Protection Committee, sort of a global body that deals with submarine cables and the interaction between each cable and other cables, as well as new uses, wind pipelines, that sort of thing. So they have some standards, and I think the standard is 3 times the water depth separation on each side of a cable. In the offshore areas, that gets to be a pretty large swath. In shallower waters, till you get to 500 fathoms or something, it is relatively small. I think it's over 1 kilometer wide, but then when it gets into deeper water, it probably could get to toward the outside edge there, gets really quite big, maybe a couple miles wide, if I remember right. We provided Gene with a copy of a graphic showing the ICPC recommended buffer, and if you'd like, I can probably share that with the group, and maybe with chat. I'm not sure if I have it on this computer, but I'll try.
Thanks for that.
Mike Okaneski.
We can hear you, Mike, sort of. We can't hear you talking, but we can hear your phone. Or we could.
Well, I guess while we're waiting for Mike, I guess I'll turn to Heather Mann. You said you had an update you wanted to add?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I actually had 2. The first, and I don't know if I can put it in the chat, I will try to. A researcher from OSU is looking for feedback on placement of some buoys off of Coos Bay as a pre-offshore wind research project to kind of identify noises and I think some other things. They reached out to the Trawl Commission, and Trawl Commission provided some feedback and then sent it to me for whiting. But I think maybe we need to share that a little bit more broadly for Oregon and see what other issues may be there. If any, there are a few from the whiting sector, and this is something I think that would be happening relatively soon in the next several months. So I'll try to put that in the chat. The second thing, I guess there's three things. The second update is another bill that we've talked about in the past, is the one in the Oregon legislature about community benefit agreements for offshore wind energy. That failed to make it out of committee. So that is no longer something that's active right now. And then the third is sort of the sister update to what Jessica provided. I've been in contact quite a bit with the governor's office, and they are reaching out to some stakeholders, including myself, to provide some sort of guidance on what next steps could be. The governor's office yesterday said it was fine to let people know that BOEM did respond formally to the governor and to the state legislators to the letter that was posted in the chat. That letter, though, has not been distributed as of yet. Just making sure that everybody that was listed on it, I guess, has had a chance to see it. Essentially, while it doesn't say granting the pause, that's what it's doing. And I think it's really important, at least from my perspective, to share again, as I did about Governor Inslee. I think Governor Kotek is taking this very seriously. And I know there's a deep commitment from her staff. Karen Powers is the staffer working on all the climate stuff. And they have spent an incredible amount of time getting up to speed and learning about what's worked, what hasn't worked in other places. There has been some reference to the Maine roadmap as something that we might want to take a look at and consider. But there's been so it's kind of the sister update to what Jessica said in terms of they've been reaching out to state agencies and also some of us that are stakeholders, not just in the fishing industry, but in labor and other groups. So more very soon on that, I would say within the next 2 weeks. And hopefully as soon as that letter is made available, we can circulate that response letter. But they did say it was fine to let people know that BOEM has responded formally. We just I haven't seen the letter. I'm not happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that. I knew BOEM was working on the letter, and I know they're also working on a letter in response to the council letter. So I don't know what the status of that is either, but I suspect we'll see that eventually. Mike, followed by Jessica.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
The phone is off. I don't know where the echo is coming from.
You want us to come back to you?
No, it's just cancel out this one.
Okay.
Hey, Mike Okaneski, I think it's because you're logged in your computer and your phone, and your computer is probably picking up, both of the speakers are on, and so that's probably why the echo. So if you can mute your computer speaker, mute yourself on your computer, that might solve it.
We'll see. Carrie, that's not it. Phone's off.
Okay. Well, let's come back to Mike. Jessica, did you have something to add, or I saw your hand go up and now I see it.
You pretty much touched on it, Susan. Thanks, Heather, for that update on the letter to BOEM to the governor from BOEM. My question was similar on interest in if we've heard a response of BOEM's response to the council, because we did hear at the council on the floor that they were working on a response to the council. So just curious if there was an update there.
I'll take that one. This is Carrie. the update is same as before. They're working on it, and I know there've been a couple of like email exchanges with Doug Boren, the Pacific Region Director for BOEM, and that's basically the latest we heard was that they're working on it. But I haven't seen anything come to the council office yet.
Thanks, Carrie. Mike, you want to try one more time before we move on? Okay, I'm not hearing Mike. So Carrie and Mike Conroy, I guess what move on to the next agenda item, I guess.
Oh, looks like
Hey,
Mike just came
Susan?
unmuted.
Okay.
Let's forget the question. It wasn't that important, but I think I figured out what it was. So I'm past that point finally. Anyway.
Hey,
thank
at
you.
least we can hear you with no echo.
Yeah, we've gone that far in about 1 hour. Right?
Mike, what was it? Just for the good of everyone who's dealing with all these Zoom meetings.
Okay, the phone was off, but I logged on twice, so it was carrying the noise from one to the other, and I don't know how it does that, but it did. As soon as I logged off on one of the connections, then it became okay.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured. Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Co-chairs, I think that brings us to the tribal update. We're ahead of schedule, so it's all right with you guys. And if Steve Joner is ready, then why don't we move forward with the tribal update?
Okay, I'm ready. I like in-person meetings. We don't have echo, and usually when somebody's moving their mouth, you can hear them talk. So I've been a proponent of that, and to that effect, I was asking BOEM for somebody please to come to the June council meeting so we could meet in person. And as you know, Doug Boren showed up, and following the day's session, we went had a sidebar with Doug. There were a couple from Quinault, a couple of us from Macaw, and Joe Oatman. And I think we had a very productive conversation, about an hour of discussion and talking about how to move forward and how to really establish collaboration between BOEM and the tribes. And, you know, I repeatedly use the example of how we work as a partner, a true partner with NOAA Fisheries and the council on the management of all the tribal fisheries. And that's our goal with BOEM, to get to that point. And so it was very timely because that following Thursday, there was a formal consultation at Nia Bay with the Macaw Tribal Council, and Doug, Dave Ball, who's a tribal liaison, Nessie Sumat, and one other person from the TED quarters showed up. And then there were others online attending from Washington, D.C. And that also, I believe, was very productive. Again, trying to advance our goal of having true collaboration between the tribes and BOEM on this, and addressing the tribes' very serious concerns about cumulative impacts to the ecosystem and to the fisheries, with offshore wind from California up to Oregon and wherever else on the West Coast. So we agreed, I guess, in principle, to put a working group together. That's not been formalized yet. I think we'll probably do that through an MOU that is being developed. But we talked about the the information that we needed, and that the tribes must be involved as the development occurs off of California, and that we can't be just notified as things progress, but must be directly involved. And for us to do that, we're going to need the help of NOAA Fisheries. So the conclusion of that meeting is we agreed to move forward, and I hope that becomes more formalized in the very near future, because as Mike mentioned, things are happening very rapidly, and we have a great sense of urgency here about what's going on, and our need to become fully informed and assured that the treaty rights and the resources that the tribes depend on, which really includes all the fish stocks that move up and down the California current, are being protected, won't be impacted by this offshore wind development. I think one advantage of meeting in person, and the BOEM folks agreed with this, that in the past when we meet, we're kind of giving presentations, and that we've had plenty of presentations. We haven't had a lot of conversation, and that happens. So to me, that's a big step forward. So we're moving ahead with BOEM, and it's going to be a daunting task. I guess the moral is be careful what you ask for, but the need we have is to get technical assistance from NOAA Fisheries. And so following that, the tribal council had a conversation, wasn't in person, but with the new West Coast regional administrator, Jen Kwan. Lila was also involved in that, and Katie Westfall from the NOAA Fisheries headquarters, talking about what we need from them, and how they need to partner with us in moving forward with answering all the questions that will be raised, and looking at the cumulative impacts from offshore wind. Lila did provide some information that they had put together on juvenile and larval fish distribution. That information was sent to NCUS and to BOEM, and then she sent it to us. And we're going to be going through that, and then hopefully be meeting with Lila and others who are involved in this in the very near future to talk about, this is what we need. We need more. Let's move forward on that. We've also had conversations with the governor's office. We just had, I was not involved in the most recent one, but it's going to be, we're going to reschedule to have the tribal staff on that one. But we'll be talking to the governor's office about our concerns. Also through the Intergovernmental Policy Council with the Olympic Coast Sanctuary. We tried to get a commitment from the IPC to begin addressing some of these current concerns through the sanctuary, and I think our last effort of that was back in December, and we didn't complete that. So at our next IPC meeting, I intend to move that forward and to get the sanctuary involved in looking at this question of cumulative impacts to the resources that not just from offshore wind that may occur adjacent to a sanctuary, but further down the coast that can have an impact on the ecosystem. The National Academy committee that I'm on, the National Academy's Standing Committee on Offshore Wind and Fisheries, we've been rather dormant since our April meeting because there was a short-term contract or agreement with BOEM, and that has been the holdup in moving forward. Not that there's any reluctance to do so, but just the technicalities of getting a new contract, a new agreement in place. So I was just informed a few days ago that they are moving forward with that and hope to have it all finalized in time for us to have a fall meeting. And the committee did forward to BOEM recommended topics around cumulative impacts to the ecosystem. So I'll be looking forward to that and getting the support of our National Academy Committee on addressing those. So again, I see the work ahead of us as very daunting. The Columbia River tribes have expressed their interest in joining our effort, although I think the lead will probably be by the coastal tribes, primarily Makah and Quinault. And we are definitely going to need the help of NOAA Fisheries and others, many of you who are on this committee, to address these questions and concerns. And I hope by our next meeting or by the September council meeting to say that we have a formal agreement with BOEM on moving forward in this. So it's been a very busy month since we were all in Vancouver, and I'm looking for a break. So that's my report.
Thank you, Steve. Very comprehensive. And yeah, sounds like you've been busy. Do we have any questions for Steve? Oh, I see a couple hands raised. Mike, I'm going to try you again. Mike, go.
Let's see if we can make this work.
We got that.
Steve, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Steve, did they then agree that there was a requirement for the consultation you asked or told them has to be there?
Yes, they've agreed that they need to have a collaboration, and that we specifically asked about these lease areas in California, and before they begin any work, actual construction, that there need to be exhaustive surveys, and BOEM talked about how those will be done and agreed to include us in that, so that if we're not actually directly involved, which I doubt we will be, but at least in monitoring it and tracking what's happening, so that our questions are being addressed in those surveys. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, I think the rest of it I can get you offline on.
I forgot to add, the BOEM has already worked with the tribes. I'm not sure which tribe specifically, but they have with Makah. They did a Makah case study in developing their guidance document for characterizing tribal cultural landscape. And because they've done that, there's already some experience in working directly with the tribes. And so I think we're going to kind of pattern it after how that was done. And so, the message to BOEM is, you can't determine what the impacts are to the tribes. The tribes alone can determine what those impacts are, what impacts the tribes. And so that's why we have to be working with them in real time and not just getting updates and reports, but in order to really for them to understand what the impacts are to the tribes, we have to be working side by side with them.
Okay, Mike, if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to go to Heather Hall.
I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Steve. That was a really good update. I did have a question about the meeting in Nia Bay. Was that just Bohm and Macaw, or did that include other coastal tribes? Sorry if I missed when you said that.
Yes, that was just with Macaw.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Steve. Do we have any other questions or comments for Steve on the tribal update? I'm not seeing any. Carrie, Mike, do we want to move to Lila and the National Marine Fisheries Service update? We're still a little ahead of schedule.
Yeah, I think we should do that. We're about 15 minutes ahead, not a lot.
Okay.
So if Lila's ready, let's go for it.
Okay.
Hello. Okay. Yes. So thanks. I have 2 updates today. The first is that NIMS is working on an offshore wind science plan for our agency and focused on the West Coast. So we're still in the draft stage and we don't have a target yet date for when we'll be ready to share that. But I wanted to let you know that we're working on this. So the plan is going to cover primary research foci that will advance the scientific understanding of interactions between offshore wind development and NIMS trust resources on the West Coast, including fish, fisheries, protected species, habitat, and ecosystems. The main categories of our draft plan at this time include habitat impacts, physiological and physical effects, species abundance and distribution, socioeconomic impacts to fisheries and fishing communities, ecosystem and climate interactions, impacts to NIMS scientific surveys, and overarching scientific challenges and opportunities. And so, as you all know, BOEM is the lead federal agency for offshore wind development, but NIMS has a role in offshore wind as a consulting agency under ESA. Sorry, I speak in the acronyms. I'm trying to remember to. So under the Endangered Species Act and under the Magnuson-Stevenson Act for essential fish habitat. We're the lead agency on Marine Mammal Protection Act authorizations, and we have unique expertise that we contribute with regards to our management responsibilities and its trust resources. So the science plan is going to guide, it's going to provide science priorities for us to guide our science work, and that will all be based on, the needs that we have for the science to inform our management responsibilities and to understand the overall and long-term impacts of offshore wind on NIMS trust resources. So we plan to have engagement with tribal nations, as we mentioned to Steve and the Macaw Tribal Council when we met with them recently. And we plan to engage with the council when we have a draft ready to share. So I will keep you posted on that. And before I move on to my next update, Carrie, do you suggest I take questions now on that, or just move on to my next one and then take questions on everything?
I think it'd be good to go ahead and take questions on that first part. And I had a real quick question. I'm sorry if I missed this, but did you have a timeline?
For the plan?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we don't have a target time yet for when we're ready to share anything, but we're getting close to having a draft that would be probably the basis of for engagement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Steve Scheibler?
Yes, thank you, Lila. Is the socioeconomic part of the needs assessment that you just spoke about, is that the same as the socioeconomic report that you're doing for BOEM?
Totally separate.
Thank
Yeah, so this, yeah, okay. Just leave it at that. And Mike,
You may have covered this, but I thought I read somewhere in Magazine Stevens a while back that there was supposed to be EFH, I guess, for food being one of those that would cover all life stages per species. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
sorry, could you repeat the question?
Covering all EFH for all life stages of a species.
I'm not quite sure what you're asking. If you want to know like more specifics about the EFH provisions, like
food. Let's just take food. For required food, for different life stages of species.
Oh, well, I'm just going to say I'm not an expert on EFH, but maybe Carrie can answer that. Carrie?
Thank you, Lila. I did put my hand up. So, Mike, it sounds like what you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you're saying since essential fish habitat needs to be identified and described for all life stages of species in a fishery management plan, you're asking, does that include prey items and food for those species? Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So the way that works is that the EFH regs and the EFH guidance treat prey items as an EFH component, but it's not EFH itself. So think of it in terms of like water temperature. You have to have a range of temperatures in order to make that water, suitable and essential part of, essential fish habitat. Or, you'd have to have a certain amount of dissolved oxygen. And if you don't, then it affects it. So you can treat prey items that way, if there's, and you're supposed to look at impacts to prey species. So we're doing the HMS EFH review, highly migratory species EFH review right now. And one of the things you have to look at is what are other impacts to the prey items that might degrade the quality of the waters in which those species are, living and feeding and growing. So I hope, I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's kind of our, that's how we characterize how we address prey items in the context of essential fish habitat.
That does answer it very well, Carrie. So if I can have a follow-up, would that mean with the science advancement that NOAA is doing that that you just mentioned, Lila, that it would be in regard to the effects or impacts of offshore wind?
The whole plan, yes, is about, it's an offshore wind science plan for NIMS.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know who raised their hand first, but I'll go to Steve Joner.
Yeah, thanks, Lila. You may have mentioned this in our call, but is this on a national level or just with the region?
Just with the region, West Coast.
Okay, so who's the lead in that, and is that you or your office, or who's?
It's our two science centers and the regional office. The two science centers are the leads, obviously, but the regional office is also involved. Our whole offshore wind team, which is comprised of all three of our organizations.
Who's on that for the region?
Oh, a whole lot of people. I'm the chair of the team, and then okay. Liz Clark and Roger Hewitt. Liz Clark is from the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, and Roger Hewitt is from the Southwest Fisheries Science Center. They are my co-chairs of the offshore wind team. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. Then I know,
Okay.
I know where to turn when I have questions. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can reach out and we can talk more if you want to know who else is involved.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Mike Conroy.
Hi, thanks, Lila. I just have a silly question. Well, maybe not so silly. Noting that the East Coast Regional Wildlife Science Collaborative just put out a draft science plan, and they're taking public comments on their draft plan. Are you planning to take public comments on yours?
We are discussing all that kind of stuff right now, but we're definitely going to be engaging with tribal nations and the council. I just don't know the mechanics of like what other kinds of engagement we're going to do yet.
Roger that. Thanks.
Mike O, was that a residual hand?
Yes, they've been going down before. I guess this one didn't.
Okay, well then I will move on to the next update. Okay, so I also wanted to let you know about a new National Academy study, National Academy of Sciences study. So the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 in section 11319 requires the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Interior, and NOAA to enter into an agreement with the National Academies of Sciences to do a study on impacts on shipping and commercial, tribal, and recreational fisheries from development of renewable energy on the West Coast. And I am going to drop a link right now into the chat to that statutory language. It's a link on the National Academy's website, and you'll have to scroll down to where it says section 11319. Okay, so the legislative language is the basis for the report that would be produced by the Academy. And no work is yet started because the agencies right now are still in the process of figuring out the funding. And so the agencies involved are U.S. Coast Guard from Department of Homeland Security, BOEM, BESI, and BIA from Department of Interior, and from NOAA, it's NOAA Fisheries, and also NOAA's IUCE program, because they have a lot of radar that is used in search and rescue operations. So, so they are involved also. The agencies will next be discussing with the NAS the development of a basic work plan for the study, including the type of expertise that's going to be required on the ad hoc committee and logistics, things like numbers of meetings, et cetera. Once all of that is done, then the National Academies would proceed with their nominations process. And the NAS has a description of their study process on their website, which I'm also going to drop a link here in the chat too. And that's pretty much it right now. I basically just wanted to give you a heads up that there is this statutorily required study on West Coast fisheries and renewable energy. And that at some point there will be a call for nominations by the Academy. So, heads up, and you can see the statutory language there. And, I think Ingrid should be on the line from BOEM. We've talked about this, and also Brian Mattel Mattel. Sorry, Brian, I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly. Anyway, from U.S. Coast Guard. So we're all involved in, working with the NAS to stand this up. And with that, we can take questions and invite Ingrid and Brian. If you have anything else you want to add, let me know. We can
Hey, Lila.
Brian?
It's Brian. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. So you said the name right the first time, which is odd.
Okay.
Brian Model from Coast Guard Navigation Center, Navigation Standards Division at Coast Guard headquarters. Lila, you pretty much covered everything on where we stand. The Coast Guard's nexus for the study will be geared towards shipping impacts and Coast Guard mission effects or degradation that might be related to commercial fisheries. So we are excited to secure funding and get this started, and more to follow. Thanks, Lila.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. Ingrid, did you want to add?
Sure. Thank you, Lila. No, thank you for this update, and we don't have anything to add in addition to what you already shared. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. So, well, with that, take questions. Yeah, Mike Conroy.
Yeah, just a real quick one. Is there an envisioned timeline for this study in terms of not necessarily seating the committee under NAS, but a timeline for a final product?
I think that the statutory language says within 1 year of entering the agreement, but it's about that. Brian,
Yeah,
you know offhand?
Yeah, that's spot on. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, it's 1 year from the commencement of the study, which we have not commenced the study yet. So I don't want to put any dates out there, but a year from when we officially start, or when the academy starts the study. Over.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at this language now, right? There's two timelines clearly specified, right? The 120 days after enactment shall enter into that agreement. And then, as Brian just pointed out, 1 year after commencing the study. So I guess, is there an envisioned timeline between that 180, or is there an envisioned timeline on how soon the study might be commenced? Because that doesn't seem to be answered here.
Well, that's what we're in the process of right now. So we are working as fast as we can to get the funding. And then once the funding starts, that would, we'd be able to move forward.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Michael.
Yeah, I heard you say nominations. What would that look like as far as composition?
At this point, we have no details at all on that. The Academy has a process, and we will follow whatever that process is. So at this point, we don't have any of those kinds of details.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's it for me, Carrie.
Thanks, Lila.
And Susan and Mike.
No, we appreciate the update. That was very helpful. There are no other questions or hands raised. The next item on the agenda is to take a break. So if that's all right with the chairs, why don't we take a break? Let's make it 13 minutes and come back at 2:30 if that's okay. And I know we have John Hanson, or actually then we go to public comment. And then we'll go to John Hanson with the West Coast Ocean Alliance update. So if that sounds all right with you guys, let's reconvene at 2:30.
Are you looking for an answer?
I figured silence was my answer.
It was.
Okay. Now you have 12 minutes. Okay, everybody, let's give it another half minute or so here, and then we'll move on to public comment and then an update from the West Coast Ocean Alliance with John Hansen. Susan and Mike, are you back with us?
I'm here.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, since we're going to public comment, for anyone who wishes to make public comment, could you just please use the raise hand feature so we have an idea of how many? And if you don't know where it is, there's a little smiley face button at the bottom of your screen called reactions, and you click on that, and then there's a button, a raise hand button. I see one. Okay, well, public comment might not take too long. Then Mike and Susan, is it okay with you if we go ahead and move to public comment, and then we'll turn to John Hansen after that? Sound good?
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Better than good. Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, Heather Mann, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and share your public comment with us?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Thank you, committee members. I'm going to be really brief, and that is I wanted to put a special thank you out really to everybody that's been working so hard on all these different issues and so many different facets, whether it's the council or ODFW, WDFW. I mean, there's just so many people doing so much. And I think it's really, really important. And I think we're seeing valuable results from all that work. But I did want to extend a very sincere special thank you to Steve Joner and the tribes for everything that they've been doing. They are so important to this process and integral to getting to the right place with all of us, supporting them. And I just thought, I'm always complaining about something. Today I have no complaints, just thank yous, and a huge thank you to Steve Joner and the Makah tribe and all the other tribal people that have become engaged on this issue because it's critically important. And thanks to you, Carrie, as council staff, for all the work that you've done. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Heather. It's always good to hear kudos for people who are working awfully hard all around the realm here on this. I do not see any other hands raised. Is there anyone, if you're for some reason not able to raise your hand, is there anyone else that has public comment? Okay, then in that case, we will move on with our next agenda item, which is an update from the West Coast Ocean Alliance. I always want to put an S on there. It's just one Ocean Alliance. John Hansen, I think you're here. So if you would give us an update on what's going on with West Coast Ocean Alliance, I'd appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it. I hope I'm coming through all right audio-wise. Great to be with you. Thank you, Carrie, for getting me on the agenda, and likewise, Mike and Susan and the team on the group to let me share a few highlights. I will, again, try to keep it short and sweet, but really appreciative to share some of our updates, and also, as always, offer myself up for any follow-ups, both on the call here as well as offline, to make sure we're keeping the Alliance tapped into all the good work that you all are doing, and various members as well. I'll start with meetings that we have in the works. I think I've shared this previously, but just wanted to give you the latest in terms of the convening plans that we're making as part of the Alliance work. We have budget set aside for 3 in-person meetings, 1 focused on offshore wind, and I'll speak about that in a moment, and 1 focused on supporting our tribal members and a tribal summit coming together, and then an all-hands sort of full Alliance summit coming together. First, on the latter I just mentioned for the Tribal Summit and the All Hands meeting, we do have dates set for the Tribal Summit and the Full Alliance Summit. The Tribal Summit is going to be happening on October 16th and 17th in Portland, Oregon, and our Full Alliance Summit is going to be happening on the same week at the tail end of the week, October 18th, 19th, and 20th. The latter part of the week, which will be the Alliance Summit, is going to be a little bit bigger and a little more open. We are still in the midst of working out details. We're bringing on a contractor to help us with some of the planning and facilitation pieces. And so details are still definitely in the works, but we hope to share more very soon about kind of specific agenda plans and invitees. And so I think for our Alliance Summit, there will be some internal planning discussions between our members, again, tribal, state, and federal partners. But I think we do anticipate having public-facing portions, if not at least one day, maybe more, that will have probably, updates, opportunities for some breakouts, engagement, public input, things like that. And so again, more to come on the details, but if nothing else, wanted to share the dates of those meetings so that people could tentatively flag that. So again, October 18th, 19th, and 20th in Portland, Oregon is the plan to host that meeting. The Tribal Summit will happen 2 days prior at the start of the week, October 16th and 17th. That really is being run by our Tribal Caucus members, and so they are really going to determine their approach for that in terms of convening tribes, first and foremost. And so if there are portions of that that may include other non-tribal partners, whether that be state or federal government representatives or other non-governmental entities or participants, that will be determined by them, and that's not something that I'm driving. We're really deferring to the tribes. I think many of you know Margaret Corby, who's based out of Oregon. She is our tribal coordinator, and so she's really supporting the Tribal Caucus dialogue around both larger tribal coordination efforts that are supported through our Tribal Caucus, as well as this meeting as being a rare convening opportunity for tribes to come together and have the dialogue that they would like to over that 2-day period. So more to come on that, but again, they are bit separate in terms of the meetings, but also something obviously we're coordinating closely in terms of how tribes can be effectively engaged in that tribal summit, feed into our larger summit, hopefully have both tribal staff as well as leadership attend in both contexts and determine where we go on a number of fronts on things like our own strategic planning. Offshore wind is obviously a key topic, talking about aquaculture, talking about data. There's a lot of things that I think we're teeing up, and we're trying to make the most of that week to see how we can piece it all together. So just more to come. And I think on these calls and, future updates that we share with the council, we'll let you know, again, as things get a little clearer, but I'm excited to have that again as a rare chance. Our group hasn't come together since 2019. So we're really hoping to maximize that as a chance to both get our group together as well as have some partnership opportunities with hopefully folks on this line and that work with the council generally. The Wind Summit is our other meeting that we have funding for. So we do plan to have a convening around offshore wind, again, in a regional context of bringing decision makers together and likely non-governmental partners together that we hope would include, for example, the fishing community, NGO community, wind developers, and others. We had tentatively tried to push that into this summer and getting it together. We realized, I think, on a few fronts. One, the calendar was going by very quickly, and so that trying to do this meeting in August was just not lining up in a way that we had hoped, and people are busy, and so we didn't want to rush it. Two, with just the regional developments on offshore wind in terms of where California is, where Oregon is, things that have shifted a bit in recent months. We really want our meeting to be as effective again as we can on the wind topic, and that if we push it into next year, which is our plan now, we will have maybe a little bit more clarity that will allow us to have a regional discussion about the current state of play, what's coming next, how states are engaging and planning, what tribes' approach to wind is, how the federal process is playing out, et cetera, et cetera. So sort of on a pinning to the calendar context, we are hoping to do that meeting in March of 2024. Location, other details are to be determined. We're thinking it'll probably be a 2-day, maybe 3-day meeting. We have a contractor on board that's going to help us plan with that. But again, another item that we hope to share more updates on and really be informed by what we're hearing from our members, but also from the council and from other partners to say, hey, if we get a big group together for a few days and we have a pretty open, flexible agenda, what can we do to make the most of that convening? And again, do so in a way that we're not obviously an industry group. We are not pushing, in favor of wind or against wind. We really just want to get the decision makers and the right partners together to have some better understanding of where things are at and, share updates, whether that's policy, science, perspectives from different representative groups, et cetera. And we think it'll be a really great opportunity to have that come together. So anyway, all that said, March 2024 is our plan. Again, hopefully gives us a little more breathing room, but excited to keep this group updated on that as it comes together and see how we can take advantage of that meeting opportunity. So that I wanted to start with in terms of meeting plans, and again, we'll share updates in the future as those come closer. Second item, I just wanted to flag that I know I've shared with this group previously, our ongoing discussions around the formation of a West Coast offshore wind science entity. I apologize if this came up previously on this call or has been discussed by council members. But I think folks are aware a lot of increasing interest in that topic and the formation of a group like that. We're watching closely the legislation in California about if and how a group like that might be formally established through California state law, and potentially how that would be funded and what that would look like as a starting point. I think from what we're hearing, there's interest if that does start in California, that it would have a regional link to other partners, both at the state level in Oregon and Washington potentially, as well as with tribal partners, as well as with other interests, whether fishing, scientific, and otherwise. And so it's a big one in terms of how that may or may not kind of move in different directions. Federal staff are tracking how they want to coordinate on this. The NGO community is working hard on it. And so we're trying to plug in just to understand what those pieces look like, where it might go next, and just inform folks that work within our alliance, but also recognize we have a really good link, we think, with regional partners on the decision-making side. And if that group does go forward in sort of the wind science context at a regional scale, we want to understand if and how we can be a useful leverage point on that. And whether that's formal, whether it's informal, whether it's just sharing information, we hope that can be something we can be a resource and a helpful part of the process. And again, we would try to understand other perspectives of what that could look like, what would be successful, what wouldn't be, and then share that with those that are helping some of those pieces come together. So a lot of conversations happening. And again, I would really be curious if others have ways they're thinking about those questions, or if you have opportunities to engage on that you think would be of interest to a group like ours. We would be all ears, because half the battle we're discovering, like I think you all know better than I, is just tracking all of these things. There's so many different working groups and advisory bodies and meetings and engagement opportunities. We really see what we hope is a need being filled, where we can just share those types of updates and understand where the pieces are fitting. So that's one second item. And last, I think just stepping back, I wanted folks to be aware for the Alliance, we are just now kicking off a new strategic planning process that's going to carry us into next spring. We have a consultant team on board, Strategic Earth Consulting, based out of California, but has done a lot of work on the West Coast and broadly with a number of partners, federal, state, tribal, and we're really excited to have them on board. So they're going to be doing a deep dive to really try to find kind of where we're going to go next. We have federal funding for the next 5 years. We have a really strong link to tribal, state, federal partners. And so we're really excited about that being a foundational piece for us. Now we really try to think about where this is going to go and understand what niche we can fill. That point I made a moment ago, there are so many groups, there are so many regional collaborations, et cetera, and it seems like there's more every day. We really want to take a thoughtful look at where we engage as a group, how we can be useful, how can we, really leverage what the council is working on, what other partners are working on, but also not go out there and try to reinvent wheels or be redundant. And I don't know, what the answer to that will look like. I imagine it's going to include wind, probably include aquaculture. I think the tribal engagement element that we support is, I know critical for us, and my hope would be something we can really take advantage of moving forward, as I know there's a lot of interest from a lot of audiences about what tribes are doing on these issues. And at the same time, we hear from tribes, they are getting pulled in a million directions with a lot of requests for their time. So how can a group like ours be a way to make that more efficient and effective, and do so in a way that tribes see as successful, and not just, from the outside looking in, kind of asking of tribes to do a million things, but really hear from tribes to inform a process of any of these topics moving forward. So I think that will be something that we highlight and try to really rally around as well. But that's all to say, we hope the next few months will really embark on a lot of outreach and engagement with partners like those at the council to understand how we leverage one another, what a group like ours can do to fill a need, and take advantage of both our federal funding as well as potentially growth in our membership, new tribes coming on board, new outreach and engagement, our in-person meetings, to make the most of what we can do as a regional ocean partnership. So more to come on that, but I just wanted to flag that as something. There may be some outreach and updates that we share, as well as requests to some of you on the line to hear from you directly and have that inform where our strategic plan lands, we hope by spring of next year. So I will stop there for sake of time, but again, any of these topics, happy to answer questions now as well as connect offline. But as always, appreciative, Carrie, for looping me in, and for the team for letting me have a few minutes with you. Thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you very much, John. I don't see any hands up. Let's see. Oh, I know. How honed in on dates in March are you right now? Mike sort of flagged the fact that we have a council meeting in March, as always.
Yes, good question. We are not honed in at all, other than that seemed to be an opening broadly that we might try to land on. So if there's a council meeting, we would definitely work away from that, so that I know a lot of our members participate in council activities. So I would be sure that we don't overlap with that.
Sounds good. Yeah, this one is early March right now. It's about the 5th through the 12th or 13th. Thereabouts.
Good to know. Yeah, we'll factor that in for sure.
Super. I don't see any hands up. Oh, and Mike, thanks for putting some. Got it. Tim had a question. Mike answered it. That's what is helpful, or that's how the chat is most helpful. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you, Mike. I didn't see that in the chat. Appreciate it.
It's good. Team effort. All right. Last call for questions for John. All right. Well, again, thank you very much, John. Yeah, we appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody. Sounds good. Thanks, Gary.
Take care. All right, Mike, Susan, this brings us to the Marine Planning Committee discussion. We should talk about developing a report for the Advanced September Briefing book. It's going to be mostly informational. We don't have, substantive comments or anything on actions or activities right now, but I think the council will appreciate hearing an update on what's the latest in all the states, and the tribal update and the NIMS update also. I think that is super pertinent and important as well. I was communicating a little bit with Susan and Mike Conroy about due dates for the report, and I think for right now we'd like to pencil in to have sections done just like we did in June. The state sort of reps are responsible for putting together the state-by-state sections that would go into the report. We'd like to have those by next Wednesday, August 2nd. It's a fairly quick turnaround, but it always is with the MPC and having these meetings pretty much right before the advanced briefing book deadline. So if you could get your sections to me and the co-chairs by August 2nd, we will turn it around very quickly and send it back out for a quick review. And we'd like to have that wrapped up by about the 7th, which is the following, whatever it is, the 7th of August. So just be prepared, first of all, to work with your, other state compatriots and put together the update and get that into us by next Wednesday, and then be prepared for a quick review and quick turnaround on comments. As a reminder, this agenda item is on the council floor on the afternoon, probably the afternoon of Monday, September 11th. If they're ahead of schedule, might jump to the morning, but I think right now it would put us probably right after lunch on the 11th. And then two more things I want to mention, and then I'll turn it back over to Mike and Susan, is that, at the June meeting, we focused on the Fisheries Communications Plans, and we had 4 out of the 5 California leaseholders come and share with us their plans and their sort of operating philosophy with communications. I think that was good. It was helpful. They are required to finalize the FCPs by September 30th, I do believe. That's 120 days. And the lease requires a sort of a review and comment opportunity, and then they have to hold a meeting as well. So that's coming up. And we've been having some side conversations, and not even side conversations, because in June, the MPC said, hey, we're here. We are interested in being on the, the council being considered an audience member for the communications. The MPC said we would be interested in reviewing and commenting on the communications plans, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, where I'm going with this is that there may be an opportunity to see the draft communication plans And if they do, then we'll probably enlist the MPC to provide some review and feedback. And if the timing works out, that may end up being a supplemental MPC report. Again, I haven't seen any of the draft communications plans, and we haven't, to my knowledge, the lessees in California haven't committed to any timeline or anything, but that is certainly a possibility. And so just everyone sort of be alerted that there may be the opportunity to review and to put together a supplemental report. But for now, we need to summarize this meeting in a report and put it together. And then the last little bit is at the end of each report, we put upcoming, events and comment periods and whatnot. So we'll include that as well. And just to keep on your radar screen, Steve Joner alluded to this earlier. We've never met in person, but there's been a desire to do that. And so we've batted around this idea of meeting the day before the November council meeting. So that is still definitely in play. So as I think I put this in my email to you the other day, just, pencil in November 1st and 2nd. And, as we sort of move forward, we can think about what the agenda would look like, what topics we would want to cover, how to optimize that in-person meeting, which would be in Garden Grove, California, right before the November council meeting. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's discussion or assignments or anything else, but I'll turn back to Mike and Susan.
Carrie, I'm sorry, I got stuck on a phone call. Did you call my name for anything or call me out for anything?
Not specifically, except I was just sort of laying out what the next steps are here and the possibility that we might do a supplemental on the Fishery Communications Plan business. And then I just was going to let you and Susan talk, or lead any discussion or questions from the MPC and confirm, any assignments that you guys want to make.
Okay, so to that end, then I'll add, I don't know if you hit on this. I did reach out to the 5 leaseholders, number one, to make an introduction as was always planned, but number 2, to reach out and see if there's anything that we, Rhoda, in this case, can do to help facilitate, the distribution of these communications plans as is required by the lease, and then, help them identify who the interested fishing communities are, acknowledging that, just sitting down with the folks in Morro Bay and the folks in Humboldt is clearly necessary. But, the list of interested fishing community members is going to be much larger, especially when you talk about fisheries that have historic use of that area. But the participants from that fishery area in San Diego or up as far north as the Washington Canadian border. So I'll keep folks updated on that. Sent those out earlier today, so I haven't been much response yet, except for the away messages. But that's it on the communication plan stuff. Steve, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I too had a call just as Kerry started talking. I realized he was talking about our report for this meeting. Could you repeat that again? Am I needing to write a report, and when?
Yes, please. Steve, if you could please summarize your verbal tribal update that you gave today and send it to me and Mike and Susan no later than next Wednesday, the 2nd. And
Okay,
then we'll turn around a draft very quickly and give you guys about 4 days or so to review and comment on that draft.
Okay, I kind of heard that, but I wanted to confirm it. So thanks.
Yep, thank you.
And Carrie, I'll do the same for California. I'll run it by Steve and Crystal before I submit it.
Great.
And I'm sure me and Jessica can work on Oregon and get something to you.
Yeah, I think it'll be a short update, Susan. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty simple.
I think so too. Mike Okoneski.
I'd just like to know, I guess, since Heather was, she's not here now anyway. I'll find out. I'll just, amongst the 3 of us, we'll figure out who's doing what. But Heather, I thought, gave an excellent, the part I was able to listen to for Washington. So it would be brief as usual. But Mike brought up a point. The communications plan is, as I understand, still a work in progress, but is it factored into their plans to do as you said, Mike, and reach out to the guys from maybe outside of the direct area that are coming in there to fish? Or is that, where is that, I guess, as far as progress goes?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Mike. I mean, the lease themselves requires the lessees to draft these communications plans, share them, take comments on them, and host a meeting with interested fishing communities. And in the email that I sent out to the leaseholders earlier today, I kind of highlighted that, that given the unique nature of West Coast fisheries, that the interested fishing community is not going to be limited to just a geographic space immediately adjacent to the lease sites, in this case, Humboldt and Morro Bay, but rather will include individuals from as far away as, like I said, the Washington Canadian border and as far south as San Diego. The albacore fisheries, the one specifically that I'm speaking with regards to, is they have historic use of particularly the Humboldt area. So at least in terms of who the interested fishing community is for that aspect, it has to be a wider swath. And we offered to help identify who folks are that they should engage with, and if it would be helpful to them, we can certainly facilitate those required meetings with the hopes that we can piggyback them on top of one another, right? Like 5 leases, 5 different meetings, 5 different communications plans. Sure would be nice if we could knock out the Humboldt ones on the same day, half an hour after each other, and the Morro Bay ones, roughly using the same time frame, just to kind of minimize the burden on the interested fishing community members.
I would hope that you've mentioned it in the past that it would, I think, but just processors are trucking from quite some distance now. So,
yep.
That would be, okay, you got it. Okay.
Well, don't forget the Magnuson definition of fishing community includes processors. That's what I'm using.
I love to hear that. Thank you.
Sorry, Carrie, did you want to add anything to that, or did I steal your thunder?
Nope, not at all. It sounds like everyone has their assignments. Lila, will you be able to write up a summary of your update that you gave today? I'm assuming you will.
I will. And I also just dropped in the chat a note about that floating offshore wind conference in San Diego in November.
I saw that. Thank you for doing that. We'll put that at the end of our report too, and upcoming activities and events and whatnot.
Look who's missing from that list.
So what's that?
Nothing. I was being snarky.
It's getting late in the afternoon. We expect a little snarkiness. All right. Well, I guess, is there anything else from the Marine Planning Community or Committee or anyone else as far as, I don't know, upcoming events? Is everyone clear that we want your sections by August 2nd? Send them to me and to Mike and Susan. Anything else? Any other questions around the horn?
I might have one for Lila if she's open to a question that's kind of, it's not pertinent yet, but it may be relatively soon.
Okay, it depends on how snarky.
Well, no, this question won't be snarky.
Okay.
Assuming that the lessees want to start doing their survey work sooner than later, are you hearing any rumblings from the Protected Resources Division that they expect to see these take requests in the form of an incidental harassment authorization anytime in the near future from any of the lessees?
Well, the guidance has always been that our Office of Protected Resources needs a lot of time to review those and, you know, work with the applicants. So if there are surveys that are expected soon, then I would expect that they would be submitting requests soon, but
Okay.
Yeah.
I just foresee that being something that we'll probably have to deal with sooner than later, right? Because each lessee will hypothetically and assuming will seek an incidental harassment authorization specific to their survey work, unless they piggyback and do it together, which I don't know that they would or would not. But that's something that we should be cognizant of that may be coming sooner than later.
Yeah, and the our Office of Protected Resources has a page where it lists out those applications and process. I don't have it at my fingertips right now, but those are posted on their website.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, that's muted. All righty. Anything else then before we adjourn? I think that's it as far as our agenda. Mike, Susan, any last words?
Just
I got
thanks
nothing.
to everybody for attending. Staying up to
Hope to
date.
God we don't have a supplemental to write. Unless it's on the communications plans.
I'll bet we will.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong.
All righty then. Well, thanks everyone. Again, this is being recorded and we'll post it to that webpage if anyone wants to go back and check it out. And we also have the transcripts being recorded. So feel free to reach out to me if you can't find access to those to help you write up whatever you're going to write up. And thanks to all the non-NPC members who joined us today. And I guess we'll be seeing many of you very soon. So I think we are adjourned.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks all.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
You bet. Have a good afternoon. We're giving you an hour and a half of your life back. So go enjoy it.
Thank you.